I'm Monica Melpass. Welcome back to the coffee shop, and we want to welcome a local-based author. He now lives in Florida, but originally from the greater Northeast Philadelphia area, and on a book tour with a terrific book. Steve Alten, welcome.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the Shell game. This is very exciting, but also disturbing, and we're going to talk about your book a little bit further. Tell me, first of all, about growing up in this area and what your memories are. I know you now live in West Palm Beach, Florida, so you've been there 16, 17 years. It's a long time ago, but nonetheless, I'm sure you have fond memories, and we want to hear about what growing up was like.
Well, you can take the boy out of Florida, but you can't take, or the boy out of Philly, but you can't take the Philly out of the boy.
There you go.
And I'm still an avid sports fan, follow the Eagles, Sixers, Phillies all the time, the Flyers, but growing up in Philadelphia was great. You know, I went to George Washington High School, attended Penn State University for bachelor's, went down to University of Delaware for a master's, and went back to Temple for a doctorate.
Still have family in the area?
Still do.
They must be awfully proud to have a homegrown author who's made it. You're on a book tour, Jersey, Pennsylvania. In fact, you're swinging by our studios as part of that. Tell me, what was the inspiration for the Shell game? Where did you get the idea? And we'll talk a little bit more about the plots.
The Shell game originally was intended to be about the end of oil, and we now know that world oil levels peaked several years ago, back in 2005, which means that the world is now consuming more oil than we're able to pump out of the ground. That's why prices are skyrocketing. But prices are just the beginning of a nasty iceberg. The lights are going to start going out. We're not going to have enough food to feed our populations, because it takes oil to grow enough food to feed our populations, and people don't realize there is no substitute for oil.
So it takes the oil to run the plows, to do the farming. You're saying we'd have brownouts based on not just the oil consumption of people directly, but also all the indirect sort of ripple effects.
Exactly. And if you follow that and understand that, you can see that everything that's happened since 2000 and the Bush administration has been orchestrated toward that end, that they know that world oil levels peaked, that we're running out of oil, that there's what they call a big rollover coming. And those events, from Dick Cheney's secret energy task force meetings, which we still don't know who attended those meetings, to the events of 9/11, to the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and the eventual invasion of Iran. That's really what the Shell game is about.
So you're saying, really, that many of those events, including 9/11, are all either allowed by the federal government of the United States, or in this scenario of your book, the next event, which hasn't obviously happened, this is fictitious, but nonetheless you say it's based in reality, you're saying the next event will be orchestrated by our own government. Where do you get that sort of hypothesis?
Well, I don't say government. There's a neoconservative faction in this country that have been controlling things for quite a while and have their own agenda. In fact, if you Google the Project for a New American Century, the neoconservative faction has laid out their own plans, which was laid out years and years before 9/11. And in their own doctrine, they basically state that in order for the United States to maintain its dominance over the world, we need to rewrite the map in the Middle East. We need to take over Iraq, Iran, Syria. We need to keep up our military strength. We need to control oil supplies. And to do that, we need a new Pearl Harbor event. And the people who signed off on this doctrine back in the 1990s were Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Richard Pearl, Paul Wolfowitz, Scooter Libby, this whole faction that is now in integral parts of our government.
What do you say to Americans who are going to the polling place? This is a pivotal year. 08's an election year. So either to elect a new from the Democratic Party candidate, or John McCain, who is known on the record for not necessarily following the standard Republican conservative voices. So maybe your scenario would not occur based on the three candidates currently in the pipeline.
My scenario may actually occur despite the next election. There are two presidential doctrines in place right now that, if there was another 9/11 event, would allow Bush and Cheney to remain in power, to cancel the next election, as bizarre as that sounds, and to institute martial law. Now, the only way you stop that is by exposing that, and I hope through a fictional novel to expose those things, and there's a lot of people out there trying to expose those things to the mainstream media without a whole lot of success.
What else can people reading this book, besides being panicked a bit, it is pretty heavy reading, what else can people think about or research on their own or do to find out more about whether they also agree with you that these scenarios could happen, or whether they would then disagree with you, they'd form their own opinions?
It's very difficult for Americans to hear that their own government or factions of their own government had anything to do with 9/11. you need to do the research, because the research is there. In fact, on the morning of 9/11, there were 5 separate war games that were occurring that were disguised to keep our jet fighters away from the hijacked airplanes. In fact, they were actually, the purpose of the mission was to mimic planes that had been hijacked by terrorists on the morning of 9/11, and the person in charge of that was Dick Cheney. What you need to do is read books like Crossing the Rubicon by Michael C. Rupert, or that discuss the war games and the scenarios that happened. Go to websites like 911truth.org, where you can actually see investigations that have been kept out of the mainstream media, and then you can determine for yourself what really happened. But the shell game extrapolates from those events and tells of the next 9/11 event that's going to occur very soon, and people need to be aware of it.
It's my job as a journalist to play sort of the opposite game and to challenge some of the theories. So these are pretty outrageous assumptions that are the basis of what is a fictitious book. But nonetheless, if you believe it as a basis of that, and then you went from there and started researching it and wrote a novel, I guess some people would be disturbed to hear those kinds of things. As you said, Americans don't want to know if that were to be true. Do you ever get a lot of flack or heat from friends, family who read your novel and who just go, wow, that's just unpatriotic at the very least?
It disturbs me. I'm not a liberal Democrat. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a novelist. But my job is to do the research, and the research is there. When I read about the fact that there are 2 FBI investigations months before 9/11 occurs, one in Minneapolis and one in Phoenix, that would have stopped 9/11 months before, and Dave Frascett, the head of the fundamentalist group for the FBI, stops those investigations and later is promoted. Those are disturbing things. I don't want to read about those things, but I have to open my eyes to it. And the shell game is like the red pill in the Matrix. Once you take this pill, once you read this book, you can't keep your eyes closed to these things anymore. And it's important as Americans that we're aware, because if it happened once, it can happen again.
I'm almost afraid to ask what's the idea for the next novel, but I know if you're a writer like most writers, you have 2 or 3 in the pipeline. What else are you thinking of at this point?
Well, my next novels are going to be going back to my original, my other 7, which is more about creatures and fascinating things and more sci-fi. I can only handle 1 of these books in a lifetime. In fact, the toll that this book took out on my nerves, 3 months after the book was completed, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's.
So it really impacted you as well, just the fear factor.
The fear factor, the anger, the frustration of knowing that these things actually took place, the lies that we were fed as a public, and the fact that we need to be aware of these things. And I hope that the shell game is one of the many tools, like the Reflecting Pool, which is a new DVD out, like some of the other books by David Ray Griffin, and that people need to read, because these are the factual things. It's easier to get these points across in a novel sometimes, but you need to read the facts.
All right, Steve Alten, The Shell Game, thank you for stopping by to talk to us on Coffee Shop.
Thank you.